Our next speaker is Slater, who is an organic farmer from the St. Mary's area in southwestern Ontario. She is the past president of the Ecological Farmers Association of Ontario, and she teaches courses on ecological agriculture. She is active in the Perth and Oxford Local 341 of the National Farmers Union, and until very recently served as a coordinator of the union's Ontario region. She's going to tell us a little bit about how you can make sustainable farming in a commons community work. Please welcome Slater.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. The National Farmers Union and the Council of Canadians have a history of working together, and a history of having some of the same analysis and sharing each other's analysis when one of us has more analysis in one area than another, or more time to devote to it. So I am glad to be here. I also want to recognize that we come from, part of the commons of looking after the lakes is a responsibility for us all, and we need to have the dialogues between those of us who come from just sort of different places within that ecosystem and that watershed. Where I live in St. Mary's, I rarely see the lake. It's a treat to come out here and to look at the lake, because I'm quite a ways from any of the Great Lakes. So I appreciate that. And but what I do as a farmer has an impact on the lake. I live in the Upper Thames conservation area, the Upper Thames watershed area, and the Thames River makes its way down to the St. Clair River, and then makes its way through here to Lake Ontario. So, so what I do and what other farmers do has an impact. Just a little bit of background on the National Farmers Union, in case you don't know. The National Farmers Union is a direct membership, non-partisan national farm organization representing thousands of farm families across Canada. We work towards the development of economic and social policies that will maintain family farms as the primary food producers in Canada. We believe agriculture should be economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable, and that food production should lead to enriched soils, a more beautiful countryside, and that includes the water, jobs for non-farmers, thriving rural communities, and biodiverse natural ecosystems. The NFU is a leader in articulating the interests of Canada's family farms, in analysing the farm income crisis, and in proposing affordable, balanced, and innovative solutions that benefit all citizens. As an organisation and as farmers who are members of the National Farmers Union, we're not afraid to speak the truth, and we are not afraid to challenge the agendas of chemical, fertilizer, processing, and distribution companies, especially when those agendas conflict with the best interests of farmers, of consumers, and of our environment, including our water. So as members and as farmers that belong to the NFU, we recognize that farmers, as farmers who work the land, we have a responsibility to protect the land, the water, the air, the life that shares this planet with us. I will note this responsibility is frequently at odds and contrary to the messages we receive as farmers, and at odds with the predominant agricultural paradigm that sort of gives us messages and works around us. So just, I think, in coming to talk to people in Toronto, I always, think things a little bit differently, what I should say to you than what I should say to other farmers. And one of the things I realized that I maybe wanted to say is that I think that in urban areas now, and especially among people who are interested in food and interested in issues, you hear lots about farmers like me. You hear about the small-scale organic farmer who's selling local food directly to consumers. And you may get the perception that that's what a lot of agriculture is about, and that's what a lot of farming is about, and it's not. I think that farmers like me and those of and there is a growing movement of interest in local food. But I think that we can be used to sort of greenwash what's happening. That you can be sold that this is what agriculture is about. That there's this great move. There's all this land being moved into sustainable farming, small-scale farming, and ecologically produced food. So I thought I should tell you what things look like in my neighborhood, in my farming neighborhood, where I've lived all my life, and how I've seen things change over the course of my time, because it has an impact on water and on our environment. When I look around my neighborhood in southwestern Ontario, and this is this is agricultural land. This is real agricultural land. That's what's around me. One of the things I see that I've seen over my life, and it's going on, and it seems to be increasing, is an increasing separation of crops and livestock. And what that means is that we have farms that have livestock, and they have a lot of livestock. We have places where there's no livestock, where farmers are just growing crops. And that's, as an ecological farmer, that is a disconnect that has no benefit to the land, to the water, to the air. Nature has put crops, plants, and animals together, and there's reasons for that. As an organic farmer, I don't survive. I can't farm ecologically and as an organic farmer without livestock and without crops. They both need to be there. Well, I need to have animals raised for meat. It's just a matter of how I do that. I need to have crops growing to feed us. It's a matter of how I do that. But when we separate livestock and crops, we get livestock operations that are using a lot of water. We get areas where there's crops and no livestock, where the ground is worked all of the time because there is no pasture, there are no hay fields that protect the land, that let the water filter through and come out cleaner. Instead, we have crop areas where if the fertilizer is put on, if the pesticides are put on, the herbicides are put on, and if we get a big rainfall, or if we happen to add a little bit too much about any of those inputs, those chemicals filter down through the water. Where we have places where it becomes easier for the water to move through and carry the soil away with it. When we have livestock on farms, we have, and as long as there's not too many livestock, when we have livestock on farms, we have the option for growing hay and pasture that covers the soil all the time and provides, along with that, it doesn't allow that just running the nutrients through. I keep a flock of sheep. I'm a market gardener. I keep a flock of sheep because I want my nutrients to come from someplace other than chemicals. So I need that manure from those animals to make into compost that I can then use to grow vegetables. So this separation, it's not good for the water, and it's increasing. The other thing I see around my neighborhood that are disappearing, the trees are still disappearing. The fence rows are disappearing. The wetlands are disappearing. The fields are becoming larger and larger. It's easier to move big equipment for growing crops if you take away those pesky fence rows, if you take away those pesky trees that get in your way. And as your fields get bigger, we have short windows on when we can plant crops. As your fields get bigger, you've got more to do in those short windows of harvest and planting. So if you have trouble using those short windows because your land is too wet, you put in more and more drains so that you can take the water away quicker. Well, then you don't have the water there when you need it later on. Then you carry away water, instead of letting it percolate down to fill up those groundwaters, and you take away some nutrients with it. So because we're putting in more drainage, and I find it odd that last year we had really dry conditions, and I saw farmers out last fall putting in more systematic tile to carry water away quicker. And I wondered why. I don't know why. But we have fewer and fewer wetlands, and I think we heard earlier about the importance of wetlands. The other thing we have is fewer and fewer farmers. I know you're hearing about all these farmers that are moving into local food, but overall, we have fewer and fewer farmers. The farms are bigger, there's fewer and fewer of us. So what we have is changing ownership of how our land is held. It's less held by family farms. It's held more often by bigger farms, but more and more in Canada, and I think more so in some other parts of Canada than here so far, we have land that's held as investments by people from outside of the farm communities, often from outside of the country. I mean, we talked about the mega quarry, and that was sort of, something that, an inkling to people in Ontario that we had foreign investors buying up farmland. And of course, for some reason, how can they make the most money? Not by farming it, but by doing something else with it. But it's a trend across the world, but it's a trend in Canada too, where farmland is now becoming less and less held by the people who work the land. And if it's not the people that work the land, you have less and less reason to care about that land and to protect that land. And the other thing that I'm starting to hear is that often it's often called land grabbing, this changing ownership, this investing in farmland. It's not necessarily about farmland. More and more I'm hearing that it's about water. And when I think about it, I realize, well, why wouldn't you be buying farmland here where we've got a climate, and even with the climate change models say we're still going to have a climate where we have some reliability of getting water coming from the sky to help us grow crops. And of course, some people would look and they say, and not only that, we've got these lakes where if we need to, we can pump water and irrigate crops. So to me, that's a pretty scary proposition. And that's something that's being done in other places where, I pretty much refuse to buy food from California because those crops are not growing on water from California. They're growing from someplace else.